I think I'll go ahead and get us started to honor everyone's time. Good morning. Thanks for joining us for the Housing for All legislative virtual gathering. We are delighted to have you with us here today. I'm Roxanne Smith, a member of St. Joseph the Worker, and passionate that all God's children have a safe, decent, affordable place to call home. About 25 years ago, God nudged me to engage the Maple Grove faith communities to come together to support the creation of affordable housing. 6 faith communities joined us in starting Housing for All. We worked collaboratively to ensure all people's dream of having a place to call home could come true. Home is essential. Home is foundational. Over the years, Housing for All broadened our work to include all of the Northwest suburbs. We were blessed to have MICAH join the table early on as a member of our group and now taking the lead on the state and federal level. Maple Grove also was a strong partner along this journey. St. Joseph the Worker hosted homeless families in our parish every year through the Families Moving Forward network. And one of our guest families had a newborn child while staying with us. That beautiful baby came home to a classroom in a church as its first home. We as community should do better than this. That is why I'm excited that you are here today. Together, we can find solutions. I recently began working with Beacon on their Bring It Home Minnesota bill. We are pushing for a program that would cover all low-income Minnesota renters with a rent subsidy, which would transform Minnesota's housing policy. We know this transformation won't happen overnight and will have to keep growing. Today, we will hear Peggy's powerful story of survival, followed by a presentation on the state overview with legislators being able to respond after that. Next, we will hear about the local perspective. Local leaders will be able to comment after that. You will have an opportunity to take action during this gathering too. As a person of deep faith, I believe when we work together, we can solve our crisis of affordable housing and ensure a home for each and every one. Pastor Sarah will now share a faith reflection for us.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Pastor Sarah Bungie, and I am looking forward and excited to be having breakfast with you this morning. And hopefully you can hear me. That is a tough thing to know about on Zoom. But the part of the scriptures that spoke to me for sharing with you this morning is actually a scripture story that you might remember learning. It's actually in Matthew, Mark, and Luke's gospel. Each of those 3 gospels cover this really cool story. I'm going to share it with you from the Gospel of Mark, the 2nd chapter. Jesus returned home and word got around that he was back home. So a crowd gathered, jamming the entrance so no one could get in or out. Jesus was teaching the word. Some people brought a paraplegic to Jesus, carried on a stretcher by 4 men. When they weren't able to get in because of the crowd, they removed part of the roof and lowered the paraplegic on his stretcher. Impressed by their bold belief, Jesus said to the paraplegic, "Son, I forgive your sins." Some religious scholars sitting there started whispering among themselves, "He can't talk that way. That's blasphemy. God and only God can forgive sins." Jesus knew right away what they were thinking and said, "Why are you so skeptical? Which is simpler, to say to the paraplegic, 'I forgive your sins,' or say, 'Get up, take your stretcher, and start walking'? Well, just so it's clear that I'm the Son of Man and authorized to do either or both," he looked now at the paraplegic. "Get up, pick up your stretcher, and go home." And the man did it, got up, grabbed his stretcher, and walked out with everyone there watching him. They rubbed their eyes, incredulous, and then praised God, saying, "We've never seen anything like this." Well, people of God, and all those who are gathered here on the Zoom call, whether you are citizens like me or legislative leaders, I am hoping that this story speaks to your heart this morning. And I wonder if you noticed how many times there was the word healing and how many times there was the word home or house. It seems to me that those two H words go together. Some people need healing and some people need housing, but in this story, we see that those two are completely connected. They're married to each other, healing and housing. There's been no greater time in all of human history than right now that we know that the need for housing is not just a wish or a dream, but an absolute necessity in this global pandemic. As I've been locked in my house, I am certain you have been too. And it makes me realize how privileged I am to have a home. So this story is so huge for us this day to consider, because you see, there's faithful, faith-filled people who would self-describe as faith people. But some of them in this story are clogging the entrance, giving a headache to the local fire department, clogging the exit, barring access to Jesus. That's what faithful people in this story are doing, and they consider themselves faithful. But the real faithful folk in this story are the ones who dig through that thatched roof in the Middle East, dig through it to lower down their friend who needs to see Jesus. They get him right in the house to where he needs to be, to where he should be. So that's the example that I want to lift out of scripture for us all today, that we might be like those bold four friends, that we might be the mighty ones that God needs in this day and this age and this region of God's world, that we might advocate for housing for all. Let us pray. Lord God, we know your call on our hearts this day. We know that you've asked us to help people come home. So help us use each of our resources, each of our spirits and our passions to work together for the common good. For it is your desire for your people. So bind us together and use us to boldly witness to your gospel call. I pray this in Jesus' name, your Son and our Savior. Let everyone say amen.
Amen.
Amen. And now I turn it over to Peggy Larkin to share with us her powerful story.
Good morning. It's so great to see so many new faces and so many people that I've met along the way, some who've helped me along my way. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you, and thank you to everyone for being here and supporting the work of Housing for All. My name is Peggy Larkin, and I lived in Section 8 property-based housing in Maple Grove for 10 years with my two daughters, Kanisha and Naomi. I benefited from a rent subsidy tens of thousands of Minnesotans wait years to benefit from, tens of thousands. I'd like to take a few minutes to share a little bit about me with you. My hope is to put a face to the great need in Minnesota and this important work undertaken by Housing for All and other partner agencies. I hope that I help you understand by sharing some of my experience that housing is an absolute basic need, and a person, a family, cannot deal with anything else less critical, such as getting a job, seeing a therapist, addressing medical needs, making sure homework gets done, even showering and attending to personal needs, all the things that need to be done to be well and thrive if they are not housed. Affordable housing without assistance is difficult to come by for middle-class Minnesotans, but frankly, it's impossible if you are low income. How does a person escape poverty with no stable place to lay their head? Nowhere to call home? It's impossible. I would not be where I am today without Section 8 housing, and I was one of the lucky ones. So many families are very low income and would qualify for Section 8 housing, but the resource is far too scarce. There are so many reasons a family ends up in poverty, so many circumstances that put families at risk of homelessness. My story is that I am a domestic abuse survivor. And when I was in the throes of domestic abuse, my housing struggles began. The Wilder Foundation Homelessness in Minnesota 2018 study found that 53% of women and 40% of men reported they stayed in an abusive situation due to having no other housing. And 33% of women and 12% of men left their last housing because of abuse by someone they lived with. That was me. I was spit on, pushed out of a moving car, threatened with a baseball bat, screamed at with my husband less than an inch from my face. Money was withheld from me. My children were hurt, and I was strangled by my husband. I wasn't allowed to work because my husband said he didn't want my daughter in daycare, but it was really about control. I could never be gone too long. I was given a weekly allowance, but I couldn't spend the money any way I chose. It was for necessities like food, toothpaste, and toilet paper. I was isolated from friends and family. I spent my days trying to work around the ups and downs of my husband's temper, but it never worked. On top of that, I had nowhere else to go and no means to support myself or my girls. I didn't leave because I had a small infant and a preteen and not one single option for housing. I managed to get on a waiting list in Richfield for a Section 8 voucher. It was the only list open at the time, and the wait was expected to be 7 years. I would be dead by then. I was afraid of dying, and I knew in my heart it would eventually come to that end. I had bags packed and hidden in a closet with basic necessities, a change of clothes, and important documents like birth certificates. I kept an extra set of car keys hidden in shoes near a door for a quick getaway, but we had nowhere to go. I had no job. I had no daycare. I didn't even have enough small change for gas. I was trapped. I've never felt so completely desperate, so helpless as a parent and person, and scared. The choices I was required to make were impossible choices. Would we sleep in the car? Would any friends let the three of us sleep on their floor? Would a shelter bed be available? How would we eat? How would I buy diapers? Would child protection come take my children because I couldn't provide anything for them? On the other hand, child protection might come take my children if I stayed in an abusive relationship, exposing my children to violence. Then the day came when I was face to face with making the impossible choice to leave. We just had to. My husband had been particularly violent on this day. He strangled me so I couldn't breathe. And in that moment, I believe that was it. I was going to die. I was able to get away, and we left with nothing. Another sobering statistic from the Wilder study on homelessness: 37% of homeless women in 2018 were fleeing a domestic violence situation. And that was the situation I found myself in. We ended up in my parents' basement in one room, sleeping on an air mattress on the floor. And I'd burned a lot of bridges, to be frank. My parents hadn't heard from me for some time. My husband had borrowed money from them, and they had no idea what was going on in my world from day to day. My parents gave me a strict timeline to be back on my feet and out on my own. I was one of the lucky ones. A friend lived at a Section 8 property-based townhome complex in Maple Grove. My friend happened to know the waiting list was open and put in a good word for me. I called the property and got on the waiting list. A few weeks later, the property manager called me and said those on the list before me had not called back and he wanted to get the townhome rented right away. I grew up in South Minneapolis and had never set foot in Maple Grove, but I went to the property that day and was in a townhome a couple weeks thereafter. My rent was 30% of my income, and my income was zero at the time. Thankfully, that made my rent zero. I must stress to you, this was a stroke of luck, a blessing, a lifesaver for sure, but it's not what happens for most people. Maybe it was simply good timing, or maybe it was my white skin that played a role in my luck and moved me to the top of that list. Whatever gave me the edge, I'm forever grateful, but I've also felt some guilt over the years. It's not right. It's not that I didn't deserve housing. I did, but so does every Minnesotan. No matter how grateful I was for the opportunity for stable Section 8 housing, knowing someone who puts in a good word is not an equitable way for a family to end up with housing just tore at me. But that's just it. No matter how a person happens into Section 8 housing right now, it's not particularly equitable. The person whose name comes up on the list for very low income subsidized housing is no more or less in need than another person who still waits. So many people still wait, some for many, many years. Remember the Richfield waiting list I mentioned I got on? Sure enough, my name came up after 7 years. 7 years I would have waited on that list, sleeping who knows where, had I not found a stable alternative. Rent subsidies for all who qualify would ensure every Minnesotan can pay their rent. There would be no more back doors, no more hoops to jump through, no more wait lists for help, no more inequity in distribution of assistance, no more homelessness. Thank God for Section 8 housing. Once I had stable housing, I could focus on healing and a future. It literally took supports from every angle to get me through, and it took a long time. That first day after I left, I contacted a battered women's shelter and spoke with an advocate who helped me with a safety plan and getting an order for protection. Family, friends, and community helped. I started to go to a 12-week counseling program where I was part of a women's group, and my oldest girl met with a counselor and other children in her age group. My youngest was cared for by an early childhood and family education counselor so we could get the counseling we needed. I went back to school, and as time went on, I got a little stronger, and fear gave way to just a little bit of faith, and that faith grew. In Section 8 housing, I can't say enough. Thank God for it. None of the things I did to heal, the steps I took to protect my family, would have happened without stable, affordable Section 8 housing. While I was trying to stay safe and pull my life together, I didn't have to worry about housing. I was able to go to school without worrying about where my family would sleep. I got a 2-year degree and began working full time. My rent went up, but I was still low income. But since I was Section 8 housing, my rent was still affordable at 30% of my income. I got my bachelor's degree and got a better paying job. My rent again went up, but it was still affordable. I went on to law school, graduated, and I'm now a practicing attorney. I've since moved on from Section 8 housing, and someone else who is in a desperate time in need of a home lives in my old townhome, and their rent is affordable. It took me 10 years to no longer income qualify for Section 8 housing. Without Section 8, I would either be dead or still in extreme poverty. There would have been no way out. I'd love to tell you that every person will claw their way out of poverty like I did. Many do. I know quite a few, some who were my neighbors. Many won't, and they're no less of a person, no less in need of a home. As a new attorney, I had the opportunity to work in a restorative court in Hennepin County that focused on housing first to reduce criminal activity. While doing that work, I met so many that could have been me or I could have been them, who spent their days searching for housing, who slept outside in tents, in shelters, in storage spaces, couch hopping. They often suffered from mental illness, a disability, or had other barriers to housing. Maybe they won't become an attorney, but they might get you your food at a McDonald's drive-through, or work in a daycare or nursing home facility, many places where some of the lowest paid work. The point is, with a rent subsidy, they can work on those things that will make them their best self. Our neighbors deserve to be housed. It's better for the entire community. I called my old complex just to see if much has changed since I lived in Section 8 housing, and the waiting list is closed. The need is still so great. My hope is my story of survival, beginning with finding stable Section 8 housing, can become a personal story for all Minnesotans. Please support providing stable housing to all Minnesotans through rental subsidies for all who qualify. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy.
Thank you, Peggy, and thank you, Pastor Sarah, and thank you, Roxanne, so much for the incredible stories and the prayer and the welcome. And we're going to move on to the next slide, John, where we're going to recognize the state policymakers that we had registered as of yesterday. And then if you want to go to the next slide, John, to the local policymakers that we also had registered for this event and wanted to recognize all of you. If there are additional policymakers that have joined us today that aren't on these two lists, we invite you to go to the chat and put in your name. And also, if you're a state senator or representative or a city council member or mayor, please go ahead and put that into the chat. And thank you again so much for being here. And we're going to move on to our next section, which is to talk about the state overview. I'm Sue Watlow Phillips, and I again want to thank all of you for joining us today. We are honored and blessed to have you all here. Many of you are working in direct services in our community, meeting the immediate needs of people experiencing homelessness. Some of you are organizing people experiencing homelessness, like Tyra and Janelle and other folks, and we're very excited about that. And many of you are working at the city and local government and at the state government, and at the Met Council in helping us in advocating for policy changes so that we can end homelessness and make sure everyone has a safe, decent, accessible, and affordable place to call home. Again, I'm Sue Watlow Phillips. I'm honored to serve God as the Executive Director of MICAH, the Metropolitan Interfaith Council on Affordable Housing, and President of the National Coalition for the Homeless. I've worked with people experiencing homelessness for over 53 years, and I experienced homelessness as a teenager when I got hurt in sports at the University of Minnesota. Over half of MICAH's board are people that have experienced homelessness, and 70% of our board are from diverse communities. We work to ensure that people who have experienced homelessness or housing crisis or housing discrimination are at every decision-making table. Our faith calls us to be a welcoming community, to love and treat others the way that we want to be treated. And MICAH members, just as a part of Housing for All, well, we work with meeting the immediate needs of folks in our community as we work together to address the structural causes of homelessness and housing crises, and to realize our mission to ensure that everyone, without exception, has a safe, decent, accessible home that's affordable. As Janelle will always say, it's not affordable housing, it's having a home that's affordable for the incomes that you have, as Peggy also mentioned. The COVID-19, and John, if you want to take that slide off, we can just go with all of our faces for right now, and then we'll come back to that. And I'll come back to the Hennepin County slide in just a minute. COVID-19 has exposed many of the disparities for many folks. While many of us have recognized that there have been incredible disparities for a long time, in regards to income, housing, and a variety of different types of services. We are now entering our 5th decade of growing homelessness in this country. And this disproportionately impacts people of color and people with disabilities that struggle with getting into housing and having a stable place to call home. So if you have money, you can get into housing, no matter what your issues are in your background. But if you don't have much money, it's really hard to get into housing. And if you don't have much money and you have anything that's kind of, an issue in your background, or you struggle with any issues, you're going to have a real hard time of getting into housing. So I'd like to take just a few minutes to talk about where we're at on the federal level and on the state level. And Tyra's going to join me in a couple minutes to talk about some of the great work that they've been working on some state legislation. So MICAH's policy agenda is directed by people that have experienced homelessness and the housing crisis to address the immediate needs of people experiencing homelessness while we address the systemic causes of homelessness as we deal with structural racism, systemic racism, and equity within our community. John, if you want to go ahead and put up that slide on Hennepin County, please. Thank you. What you can see here in Hennepin County is that we have 146,781 households, 84,402 renters, and 62,379 owners that are paying too much money for their housing. That means they're paying more than 30% of their income for housing. And what we have is a situation, especially with the COVID-19, where a lot of these folks are at risk. So we have some good news for homeowners that just came out yesterday, is that there's been now an extension on being able to stay in your home and the protections there until June 30th of 21. And that would allow folks to do forbearance and still apply for forbearance. This is an extension that happened. And then for renters, the president is declaring the continuation of the COVID-19 national emergency. In addition to that, at the end of last year, we passed legislation that included $25 billion in rental assistance for our renters that are behind on rent. And so that program here in Minnesota is about $375 million that came to the state of Minnesota, to Hennepin County, the city of Minneapolis, Ramsey County, city of St. Paul, Dakota County, Washington County, and Anoka County. And so they're all coordinating to put out a way for people to apply through that. It'll be similar to calling into 211, also through the internet, and also specific groups that are applying to help our diverse communities that may have struggles with utilizing the internet or may not have internet to actually be able to do this application. Landlords will also be able to apply directly for these dollars to help their tenants in being able to stay in housing too. So we're very excited about the rollout of this program, which should happen in the next week or so. In addition to that, we are working on the American Rescue Plan, which will also have another $25 billion in rental assistance and utility assistance that we believe the U.S. House of Representatives will pass today. It also has $5 billion in assistance for homeless folks too. So we're very excited about that moving forward. Many of you are aware that we are currently in a Minnesota peacetime emergency, so we have a moratorium on evictions. Unfortunately, yesterday in federal court in Texas, a judge ruled that the national moratorium on evictions, which basically is what's in effect for other states, is unconstitutional. And so we just found out about this late last night. So we are working to basically appeal that case on the national level and to make sure that our other states are able to keep people in their housing as we're getting this rental assistance out to them. As a part of our work with MICAH, we've been working on the lead safe home bill, and I'm going to have John put that up real quick. And this bill was written by Tycia Fletcher, an African-American woman with 2 children. Her children were both poisoned by lead paint. The bill is named after her son, the Dustin Luke Shield Act. And Dustin was permanently disabled for life because of brain damage done by lead paint. And so we've been working on this bill for the last couple of years, and we think that we have a really good chance of passing it this year. 1 out of every 100 children in Minnesota have elevated lead levels. 84% of those folks that are poisoned by lead is because of lead paint. And 1 in every 3 homes in Minnesota still has lead paint in it. So this is an issue that faces us across the nation. It only costs us about $2,500 to make a unit lead safe by painting over the old paint. And it costs us incredibly to human lives of this children being disabled for life, their families' whole life being disrupted. And as taxpayers, about $100,000 per year per child for the rest of their life. So with Dustin, as taxpayers, to provide him all the services he needed because he became damaged in his brain and became disabled, we've spent over $1 million in his first 12 years of life. So I encourage you to help support us as we move this bill forward. Another bill that we're working on with Homes for All is the Shelter Residents Bill of Rights. And I'm going to turn it over to Tyra, who's going to talk about how that bill came into existence. And John, if you'd be willing to take that slide down while Tyra's talking, that'd be great. Thank you. Tyra, if you want to come on.
Good morning. Okay. Good morning. I just see your face, so let me go somewhere.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Just continue. We've got you on the full screen.
Oh, okay. Well, I can't see it. My name is Tyra, and I'm from Street Voices of Change. I am formerly homeless and born and raised here in the state of Minnesota and in South Minneapolis, part of Horn Park neighborhood. And on and off homelessness, staying in shelters. My experience there was traumatic. And when I received housing, I couldn't get it out of my head how I was treated and how other folks that I observed in shelter were being treated, and I had to find a way to fix that. Anyone is subject to lose their home. It could be divorce. It could be like Peggy so eloquently talked about, domestic violence, separation, floods, fires. It doesn't always have to be rent. Rent, yes, is a key driving factor. But there are all kinds of ways where people would be displaced. And I thought to myself, I don't want, if that would happen to me and I had to return, I didn't want to be treated like I was before and be in that situation for very long. And then also other folks that would come behind me. And so I just was seeking to talk to other people. And for a while, it felt like I was the only one having this conversation. And I bumped into a group, small group at the time at Central Lutheran Church of Minneapolis, that was having that same conversation about concerns. And some were formerly homeless and some currently homeless. The group grew over those concerns very quickly. it was like there was a place for people to have these conversations, and they felt safe to have them without reprisals, without retaliation. Because when folks complain in shelters, you pretty much got labeled, and ultimately, in some cases, kicked out. Sometimes in the middle of the night, even, and it didn't discriminate whether you were male or female. And so, after all of our angst, and along the way, we had many losses. We lost a lot of friends that we had built relationships in the homeless community, due to crime, due to cold weather, even. And then also, um, uh, some of our friends were even incarcerated because it's criminalized to be homeless. And so the group grew to 4 locations. And then we started getting to a place where, okay, yes, now we recognize what the problem is. What are the solutions? And that's how the Street Voices of Change, Shelter Residents Bill of Rights came together. And so now then it came to a place where do we take this? How do we get this in a place of a standard, if you will? And we started in Hennepin County. We built collaborations with the Office in Homelessness, David Hewitt. We started talking to our commissioners, and also even collaborated in conversations with the 5 adult shelters in Hennepin County, in Minneapolis. And so, after 4 years, now here we are at a legislative level, and it was kind of shocking to me. It was kind of like, your dream coming true, that folks are going to get the aftercare, the continuum of care, if you will, from being displacement and loved and respected, and in a dignified way to find their pathway home. And we must enforce the Shelter Residents Bill of Rights and the 10 key points through this legislation. Um, we at Street Voices of Change have key advocacy messages and calls to action. Shelters should be regulated to protect the residents. Other sector. Sleeping outside should never be safer and less traumatic than staying in a shelter. 60% of sheltered folks choose to be outside or somewhere where it's not inhabitable because they don't feel safe, or shelters, or because of the strict regulations. And for many, many years, you had to pay. And shelters should be across the board 24/7 shelter operations as a standard, 24/7, because life is not restricted just to the daylight. Thank you for your story, Peggy. Thank you for recognizing. I really enjoyed what you had to say, because the high racial disparity in the unsheltered and the homeless leans toward Black and Brown and Indigenous bodies. But I always talk about the white privilege that are suffering as well. And I thank you and appreciate you for recognizing that white privilege played a part into how you may have been in before so many others.
So Tyra, can I,
yep.
we've got to continue to move on. I'm just going to talk a little bit about that bill moving forward, unless you want to just finish up and talk about how the bill's moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Because I'm still like sleepy. I'm still waking up. But, however, at the legislative level, the reception, I feel, has been receptive, really, really receptive. Representative Gomez, Representative Keeler. I've got some fan faves out there that I'm following now. Representative Howard, and it's just been really receptive. It's moving, and I just ask that you support the task force and also the Sheltered Residents Bill of Rights, so that there is a standard of care that people get treated with dignity and respect. And I thank you for letting me have a little more time to ramble, but that this is really a great time in Minnesota to start caring for people better, because everybody's been doing their work. Folks have been paying their taxes. Folks have been paying their property taxes. They give, they donate, they volunteer. And to know that now homeless folks have a voice at the table after trillions and trillions of dollars about what you think I need and not asking us what we needed is keeping me hopeful. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Tyra. I really appreciate that. We're going to just go back to the slide on the Homes for All real briefly. I'm just going to run through that real quickly. If John, if you want to put that back up again. And again, the Shelter Residents Bill of Rights is a part of our work with Homes for All. We have 270 organizations across the state of Minnesota that are working on this agenda. Encourage you to go to Homes for All. It's also up on the MICAH website, and we'll put that information into our into the chat later on. We're also working on the source of income discrimination. Oftentimes people with a Section 8 or a housing subsidy have trouble using it. So we're trying to make that, and there was a hearing yesterday on that, to try to make it so that if whatever income you have, that's qualifies you for a housing unit. Also a number of things on eviction reforms. Michael Dahl from Homeline's here and is working very much on that, and encourage you to follow the work that they're doing. The Bridges Rental Assistance Program is to assist our folks with mental health issues in being able to get into a subsidy and as they're waiting for the Section 8 program. Housing Supports is the old GRH programs. They're doing some increases there and some waivers there as we also work to try to just make sure that people are only paying 30% of their income for housing. Of course, we need a lot more dollars for addressing the emergency services and the COVID-19 assistance while we're still in the pandemic. And this is a key thing in increasing the resources that we have for outreach on the streets, as well as shelter and transitioning people back into housing. The deeper affordability for new use of bonding, we're going to be asking you to and make some calls with us later in this next hour to encourage 100 million in housing infrastructure bonds, with 30% of that with focused at 30% of median income and below for people that have lower incomes. Longer term of affordability for our housing units, so that we're at 30 and 40 and 50 years instead of like 10 and 15 years, so that our investment is staying with the property for a long time as affordable housing. The 4D,
Sue,
make sure.
I think we need to move to Kelsey in the interest of time, or we're not going to be able to complete everyone.
Okay, so if you want to just take a look at this and take a snapshot of this, this will also be up on the MICAH website. So thank you all very much for your support.
Thank you, Sue.
So Kelsey, if you want to go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. My name is Kelsey Dawson-Walton. I'm chair of the Osseo School Board, and I also know Director Thomas Brooks and Director Tamara Grady. They're also on the call too, my colleagues. So feel free and jump in if you have anything you want to add to this really important conversation. I also want to introduce Chrissy Zimba. She's our district liaison for homeless and foster students. And, I'll kind of give just some of my thoughts, but then also I really want to let you hear quickly from Christy. Her team is really incredible in this space and working with our youth, our students and their families, and filling in the gap. And so it's really important work. And so, and I just want to say, Peggy, you touched my heart, and like brought me to tears, and I'm trying to come out of that because it was, I needed to hear that this morning. So that was good. That was really impactful for me. Just to provide some background, I work at Hennepin County. I've worked there for 11 years on my day job, my full-time job, I should say. And I lead our engagement services division. It's fairly new. Prior to that, though, I worked for 4 years for Commissioner Gail Dorfman. Many of you on this call probably know her because I feel like when you're in the housing field and work, so it's a tight-knit community. So I really launched my career in government. Housing was in working with people experiencing homelessness was just a core part of that. I also worked at Simpson Housing Shelter as a shelter advocate for many years and served on the St. Stephen's Human Services Board as well. And also I wanted to share that my mom, who I think is on this call, she's actually executive director at YouthLink. So it's it's an agency working with youth experiencing homelessness and highly mobile youth. And so, you know, one of my daughter's Girl Scout troops a couple years ago went to YouthLink to do a volunteer project. It was pre-pandemic, of course, and we were talking to YouthLink staff about housing and homelessness. And one of the little girls, well, they were in 4th grade, I believe, but shared that she, and these are students that go to an elementary school in our district, Osseo School District. She just raised her hand and she shared that she has experienced homelessness. And I think that that moment, everybody paused, the Girl Scout troop leaders, some of the parents that were there, even some of the staff at YouthLink, certainly the girls, and were just, they just didn't, you know, nobody really knew what to say. But what I think the impact that it had was that it was, it impacts people. You don't even know, you know, what people are going through and how people are living. You know, you come to school with a happy face or not a happy face, but you're present, and you know, you don't always know what people are going through. So it was a really powerful lesson, because housing impacts, you know, our educational outcomes. I mean, that's just, we know that, period. And this year it's exacerbated in every single way, as many of our speakers have already talked about. Quality housing just, you know, impacts our attendance, mental health. It exacerbates historical trauma, particularly in our BIPOC communities. And this pandemic will have a lasting impact on the mental well-being of our young people, particularly those who have already existing mental health needs. We know opioid use is up, depression, suicide are just growing concerns, again, before the pandemic, but even now. The spread of COVID, physical distancing, you know, all the messaging that comes out, it doesn't really fit when you don't have a home or you're mobile, constantly mobile. And so without stabilizing environment, you know, having like a stabilizing environment of in-person learning, our students in general, specifically our students experiencing homelessness or those who are highly mobile, become even more disconnected. And it's really been apparent. And I believe that, you know, we're not dealing, you know, if we're not dealing with the essentials of survival, the basic needs, you know, how do we expect our students to learn? And the focus really of the board, you know, we're a policy board, and engagement has been engagement and social emotional well-being is something that we all have consensus about. We all believe there's a sense of urgency about. And, you know, we want to be able to lift up our youth voice, especially going into this summer, really help our youth become advocates, you know, self-advocates, and push back on the system to see what's working and what's not working. And how it, oh, sorry. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to, I
Okay.
feel terrible. I hate doing this. I hate this part of this, but we're going
No,
to
it's
have to
fine.
move on.
Okay.
Just in the interest of time, so we can let everyone have a chance. So thank you so much,
Thank
Director
you.
Dawson-Welton. We
Yes.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
And so now we're going to move on to the questions that we'd like to have state and state senators and representatives talk with us about. And we're probably going to shorten this up to about 5 to 7 minutes instead of 15 minutes. And so if you are a state senator or representative and you would like to talk about your support for the Lead Safe Home Bill, the Shelter Residence Bill of Rights, Homes for All agenda, and then also how you will support equitable solutions in ensuring our students, no matter where they live, have equitable opportunities, as Kelsey was just talking about. So if you're a state senator or representative and you want to raise your hand or unmute yourself, we'll try to call on you right now. We know that several of our legislators were unable to join us today. Fridays typically are not a committee meeting day. 3 committees were called for today in this last week, so we apologize that we're not going to be able to hear from everybody. I'm going to start out with Jason, and Representative Fraser had a statement that he wanted to provide because he wasn't able to be here. So Jason, if you want to go ahead and read Representative Fraser's statement, please.
Yes, thank you, Sue. So Representative Fraser is 45A for New Hope, Plymouth, and Crystal. I wanted to let you know that I will absolutely support the Homes for All agenda. We need to ensure that all of our homes are lead-free. I know the impact that lead has had on our health and specifically how it can harm the mental development of our children. We have to ensure that we eliminate these types of harms in our homes. We all deserve safe and stable housing. I also support the Shelter Bill of Rights. Residents deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. The Shelter Bill of Rights will help to ensure that that will happen. I'm on all the housing. I am all in on the Housing for All legislative agenda. We live in a prosperous nation and a prosperous state, and no one should go without shelter. For those seeking to be first-time homebuyers to those facing the challenges of life can often reign. The Housing for All agenda seeks to remove those barriers to address all the needs of the full continuum of housing. Our state suffers from some of the most extreme disparities in the nation when it comes to our BIPOC communities. I plan to use my voice as a legislator and my position as a policymaker to ensure that every student has equal opportunities no matter what zip code they live in.
Thanks, Jason, and thanks for reaching out and asking Representative if he wanted to do a statement, because we knew that he wanted to be here. Any other representatives or senators? I'm looking for Jason and John and Bob to help me identify if anybody has their hand up.
I believe Senator Hoffman.
Okay, Senator Hoffman, go ahead.
Are you still on, Senator Hoffman?
I am, Jason. How are you?
Doing well. Good to see you again, sir.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for inviting me to this Friday morning. Usually we're hanging out in Maple Grove, but I'm okay. This is a new way of doing business, right? So I want to spend the next hour and a half talking to you guys about the importance of inclusive housing. Are you okay with that?
I think you have about 90 seconds.
You're funny. No, actually, Senate File 1770, which is a Housley bill, I've asked twice to become a co-author on that, and I just we sent another request this morning. So if you wanted to reach out to Karen and just have her add me to that, that would be great, Jason. I think one of the things we look at is something that about intersectionality that occurs within any conversation we have regarding policy. And for example, 17% of our total population are people who live with a disability. When you look at sheltered, homeless, 43% of the people in a sheltered homeless environment are living with a disability. The Wilder Foundation makes it very clear when you look at codependency things that are happening, whether it be co-occurring conditions of mental health, substance abuse, all of a sudden your numbers are up on the homeless about 90%, and which is sad because we're not saying to ourselves as a system, we should be looking at that holistic person. And I want to thank Tyra and Peggy for bringing something that just absolutely punched out to me was, can we start treating people like people again? I mean, isn't that the bottom line? And so why are all these things that are occurring in these discrimination and bigotry that occurs when you look at somebody, the biases that occurs on homeless? And Bishop Harding Smith told me this as we were feeding homeless in Minneapolis and just observing just what's going on, right? And he said, you know, John, if you could help get a handle on mental health and substance abuse, you will absolutely fix homelessness. And Bishop Harding Smith is absolutely correct in that. And I don't know if you guys know who that is, but he's from Brooklyn Park and he's a dear friend. But when you look at the four things, the top four causes, right? Affordable housing, number one, unemployment, poverty, number three, mental illness, and lack of needed services. So where is this whole conveyance of the collective thought about how we can absolutely help our society heal from what we need to be doing? So thank you for letting me come back again and be here. And I appreciate your continued advocacy and what we're doing. So thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, Senator Hoffman.
Thank you very much. And so we're going to move on now to our local perspective. And John, if you want to go ahead and put up this slide.
Sorry about that. Had a 9-year-old yelling at me about his breakfast.
Oh, okay. Well, in the Zoom world, we may have kids running in and we may have dogs and cats running in the background. So So our next panel is Elizabeth Brown, Nalima, Lydia, and John, and we're just going to have them go right in order. So Elizabeth, you want to go ahead and start? You can take that screen down, John. Thank you.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? I'm Liz Brown. I'm the Executive Director of Cross Services, and I just want to thank the speakers so far. We hear these stories multiple times a day. The inequity, even when someone finds a place to live, they're at the mercy of that landlord. We worked with someone just not so long ago that they were just really being abused by their landlord, but couldn't do anything about it because they'd finally found a place to be. And so there's so many components to this. Another man was home, living out of his car. He came in just to get some food. He had job interviews the next week. And we're like, how in the world can you go to job interviews when you're living in your car? So we put him up in a hotel, even though that wasn't his request, so that he could get through those job interviews and get a shower. And there's so many things and so many components that are associated with a safe home. We provide services, crosses out in the Rogers area. We serve 6 cities in the area, and we primarily work with food, several different food programs, and work with housing stability, job stability, and then some children's programs as well. Basic needs, food, clothing, housing support. We work with basic needs, and all of those things really depend on that place that you can call home. We have seen an increase in homeless families for sure. The hotels in our area have actually started calling us, asking us if we can help some of the people that are coming to their doors. And so it's definitely seen a change in that environment. But we're excited to see opportunities to work together. I do know that there's hopefully some affordable housing units and such that are kind of in the works. And so we're hoping for good things, but there is such a difference between the need and the availability. And we see that every day. So it impacts every part of life. Peggy, I appreciated what you said about the things that you think about if you didn't have a home. If we couldn't go home to a home, it isn't just not having walls and doors. It is all those aspects of life for our children and for our lives. So as I said, we've all kind of gone through our versions of COVID and pivoting all over the place, but we are an essential service. We've continued to be open and been greatly supported by the community. So we're all for what's going on, and we want to be a part of the solution. I'll save you some time.
Thank you, Liz. That was helpful.
Nalima?
Yes, right here. So good morning, everyone. My name is Nalima Sitati Munene. I'm the Executive Director of ACER Inc. ACER is the African Career Education and Resources Inc. We're an issue-based organization, and we work at the intersection of racial justice and community development. And our mission is to close the inequity gaps that exist within our communities. So I'm going to talk about the local perspective on housing because we work within the North and Northwest suburban areas. Addressing housing justice is a big bucket of our work. And I'm not going to repeat a lot of the information that has already been shared, but just want to highlight some points about what is going on in our communities and what we've encountered in our work in housing. So I'm going to begin by giving a general overview. We all know that we have struggled with issues of housing justice and inequities, and the COVID pandemic, while it has exacerbated a lot of the housing issues, we know it is not the cause of the root cause of the housing issues, but it has definitely just made it worse for our communities. And so I would like to highlight some of the things that impact our community area. So I think there's this myth, especially within the fostering suburbs, that we have an abundance of affordable housing, that we shouldn't be building any more affordable housing, and etc. However, we do know from our work and from the data, it tells us that most of our tenants are housing cost burden. That means they're spending 30% or more of their income. And when it comes to tenants, especially most of the tenants who are living in their apartment buildings, they're easily spending more than 50% of their income on rent alone, even though they're living in dilapidated housing, they're living in unhealthy housing that, honestly, for some of those units, they're not fit for human habitation. And so that is something that we really need to look at. And that is why they could not afford to have an emergency. And that is the reason why the COVID pandemic, requiring people to stay in place and not go to work, and people losing jobs, etc. These folks could not afford to have an emergency because they were already housing cost burden. Another challenge that we know in our area when it comes to housing is insufficient housing. We do not have sufficient housing, in the northwest suburbs. And what does that mean? That means that there are a lot of large families living in overcrowded one-bedroom apartments. We are not building the right size of housing, especially when it comes to rental units. We're not, I don't know when was the last time we built a 3-bedroom housing, 3-bedroom apartments. And frankly, that is the average size of housing that we need for our rental communities. And over and over, we're seeing a lot of proposals with 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom housing. We're not building sufficient housing for the existing need. I've already mentioned unhealthy housing. A lot of this housing is old, and while we're great champions of continuing to preserve this housing, it needs to be repaired, and we need to talk about what our housing codes are and how we're holding landlords accountable to ensure that this housing is healthy. When we talk about the housing continuum, we have big housing gaps. And so when we talk about housing continuum, we're talking about how do we move people from homelessness to affordable housing, and being able to move to mid-range housing, and then to be able to move into the, to the open housing market. Another issue that we have right now is a very, very competitive housing market. It is very hard. I was looking at the MLS listing in Brooklyn Park. I think there were only 6 homes up for sale, and they were all under contract, right? And I know we as an organization, we've been trying to help a lot of people find housing. It's almost impossible. Even with the difficulty of home ownership, it is almost, impossible to purchase housing right now. So we have this huge housing crunch. And then there's also the threat of displacement, whether it is through the COVID pandemic or the upcoming redevelopments are a great opportunity. But if we're not intentional about this redevelopment, then we face a real fear of displacement and gentrification. And so I want to talk a little bit about how we have been responding as community and local government has been responding. As an organization, we do a lot of tenant organizing because we believe that it is the folks who are most impacted who are best suited to come up with the solutions, the best solutions. And so tenant organizing has really made housing front and center in the northwest suburbs, and we're glad about that we have a lot of folks who are most impacted coming up and talking about their issues. And so far, it has been a long time coming, but we have had some good response from local governments, and so we want to say thank you. But we need to do more. So we're working with a number of local governments to pass policies that will secure a long-term investment in housing. We're working on policies to continue to support tenants' rights at a city level. And if your city is not engaged, let us know how we can engage with you. We're working with a number of cities to come up with fair housing policies. And also the city of Brooklyn Center has taken a leadership role, and we're working with them to come up with long-range comprehensive housing plans. And what does that mean? It means that the north and northwest suburbs have changed over time. We have moved from being this, bedroom communities and homogeneous communities. And what we're doing in Brooklyn Center, I said, we know what we have been, we know who we are now, but how do we how do we do this comprehensive community engagement and think about what is the future of our city? What is our future need? And so how do we have this long-term range plans instead of having this, instead of solving this little housing issues piecemeal? We need to start addressing the root cause of housing. And so we're happy that the city of Brooklyn Center is taking a leadership in that and has a working community group that is looking into how they continue planning for the future of their housing so that it can be sustainable. In terms of opportunities, there's great opportunities for local governments and cities in our area to continue to advance fair housing policies. there's great opportunities for redevelopment, but as I mentioned, we have to be intentional that it does not result in displacement and gentrification. We need to continue strengthening local investments to secure housing for the long term, and we need to continue to advance local policies that are going to advance tenants' rights and tenants' protection, continue to support the production of affordable housing. And I'm winding down. What we finally say is that housing is a basic and fundamental human right, and that is the perspective that we take, and that is the lens through which we should be operating. Thank you, Roxanne.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Oh, thanks. I'm going to share a few slides. Is that okay?
Please do.
Okay. Okay, can everyone see that? Okay. So good morning, everyone. I am Lydia Morgan. I'm glad to be with you today. I'm an age-friendly communities planning consultant. I'm here on behalf of age-friendly Maple Grove, and I'm going to share a little information about age-friendly communities because I'm guessing that everyone is familiar with the concept. And then also a little bit about how we intersect with housing. But also before I start, I just want to add my voice to acknowledging Peggy for sharing your very moving story and very personal story with over 60 people on a Zoom call this morning, and being willing to do that to drive these messages home. So thank you for that. Age-friendly Maple Grove is a community-driven, city-sponsored initiative to make Maple Grove a better place to grow older. We have a leadership team of about 15 to 20 cross-sector professionals and community volunteers. The City of Maple Grove is also a member of the World Health Organization AARP network of age-friendly states and communities. I'll talk about that a little more in a second. This is a quick look at a number of our community partners who are actively involved in the initiative. Several of them, including the City of Maple Grove, also provide financial support for our work. And so what is an age-friendly community? There's many definitions, but I'll give you a few key characteristics. They deliberately include older adults in planning and decision-making. They recognize that where we live, our community plays a huge role in how we experience aging. Second, age-friendly communities respond to demographic shifts. And yes, our population is aging. And yes, age-friendly communities are about demographics, but they're not only about demographics. They're fundamentally the right and smart thing to do, but it's just now more apparent and more urgent because we have more older adults than ever before, and our communities were not planned for modern lifespans. Finally, age-friendly communities recognize and help to maximize older adults' immense social and economic contributions because these are often undervalued. I mentioned that the City of Maple Grove is a member of the AARP Age-Friendly Network. This is a rapidly growing movement. You can see there are 7 Minnesota cities in this network. Here in Northwest Hennepin County, Maple Grove and the City of Brooklyn Park are members, and Hennepin County itself joined in 2019. And the state of Minnesota is likely to enroll on the state level sometime this year. So this helps demonstrate how governments and communities are recognizing the need for deliberate, coordinated efforts and new ways of thinking about how we are aging together and how to respond to demographic shifts. So there are many ways that we can apply an age-friendly approach to housing. And in fact, the best approach is from multiple angles because there's not a single solution. So of course, more affordable housing development is needed. Maple Grove is fortunate to have Arbor Lakes Commons, a Section 8 senior housing building that is beloved by residents, a couple of whom are on our leadership team. It is centrally located in the city, kitty corner from the library and within walking distance of downtown. The demand is very high. The need for affordable senior housing is great and growing, given rising housing costs, the rising number of older people. We are living longer, so we need housing for much longer. and a number of other factors. Second is simply creating a greater variety of housing types and choices. This can also help get at the affordability issue by providing a broader range of products and price points. We also need to find new ways to connect housing and services to keep people living well and safely at home. Also, home design. New construction should be designed to be accessible or use universal design principles. This is cheaper and more efficient than going back and trying to retrofit inaccessible homes later. Currently in the United States, only 4% of homes have features for people with mobility challenges. And finally, alternative models of housing like home sharing can open up new choices for people. So Age-Friendly Maple Grove has a 3-year action plan, which all Age-Friendly Network members are required to develop. And we include a set of housing strategies. So our action plan is there on the right. It's available on our website if you're interested. So broadly speaking, we work to add our voice to the call for more affordable housing, and we put an older adult lens on that work. And we also partner with the City of Maple Grove to incorporate aging and demographic shifts into its housing decisions. And I want to acknowledge the City of Maple Grove for its support and partnership, which is just so incredibly fundamental to this work. And I know a number of people from Maple Grove are on this call, so thank you. And finally, we educate the community about a whole range of housing resources and information. So thank you for your attention this morning. I encourage you to visit agefriendlymaplegrove.org for more information, or you can contact the initiative there, and you can contact me at the information on the screen if you are interested. So thanks to Housing for All. We are proud to be part of this work. And I will pass the baton.
Thank you, Lydia. We'll now move to John Duffy. Thank you.
Okay, and let's see, am I on here?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Okay.
And John, do you want us to put up a slide, or are you going to share your slide?
I can't do it. I'm having a computer problem. I can't do it.
We'll have John put it up for you.
Okay, later on, whatever. I'm one of the landlords. I'm building and operating affordable multifamily units since 1986. Our residents are working families, 50, 60% income levels, mostly in the service area. We do have some market rate units, and we do have some, very few actual subsidized units. Our diversity by race everywhere, you can just go through any local retail store, any grade school, and that's the population that we have in our units. Maple Grove specifically, just over 50% of our units are homes to minority families. 6% of them are to seniors, which that's the group that's kind of being left out of the conversation, as Lydia mentioned, and should be followed up on. Okay, what's the COVID effect on our operations? Well, if you remember, almost a year ago now, we were shutting down business offices, community rooms, exercise rooms, daycares, cleaning twice a day. We had collecting rent checks in boxes that sat for days and days in all the different units because you couldn't touch them, if you remember that. We had and still have buildings with maybe 75 adults and over 100 children in them 24/7 with no place to go and nothing to do. Water usage is up, maintenance is up. We've added dumpsters at every site just to collect Amazon boxes. And that just hasn't changed much. There's that old line about how love teaches us who we could be, but war teaches us who we are. That's an obvious exaggeration, but we've had a wildly varied reaction on the COVID situation from people that we never expected. From our managers and our maintenance people, we had people working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, all the time, doing anything and everything that needed to be done and covering up for their coworkers that didn't show up. They didn't want to die. They didn't want to bring the virus back to their family. And I get it. They didn't sign up for this frontline work. The grocery store workers didn't sign up either. We had some residents who complained about everything. And then we had a surprising number of residents who stepped up, and people that you'd never think would help. And they were helping with maintenance, cleaning, walking around the site, picking up papers, going to the grocery store and buying groceries for other people in the building. So I guess I'd say people's response to the virus was as uneven and unpredictable as the hurt that was caused by the virus. Shutting down businesses and schools, while necessary, had and is still having a real social consequence. Keeping kids off the playgrounds and away from their friends and in homes that are going through a lot of stress and causing, there's quite a bit of increased domestic abuse. It's caused quite a strain on our residents and our staff. Somebody put up a sign that said, no woman has ever shot a man while he's vacuuming. Well, that kind of became a mantra in our office. We were, how'd things go at home this weekend? And we'd say, oh, I did a lot of vacuuming. It's just something that we have to go through. I guess this too shall pass. A good surprise for us is the rent collections. We were seeing expenses go up and we thought income was going way down, but in May, we realized 95% of our tenants were either paying the rent on time or they're in a workout program of something. That dropped to 92% by November. At Christmas time, it suddenly dropped to 88%, and that's where we are now. I tell you, the COVID relief and a lot of the local churches, the support has saved us. Today, we have hundreds of people that are in workout payments, currently in workout payments. And we have about 1% of the people that are taking advantage of the moratorium. I want to point out that whether it's market rate or affordable makes no difference. There are a few people who are saying this is a good time for free housing. Honestly, I'm surprised there's so many people that are still keeping up with the rent. They're out of savings. The agencies they've been working for are out of support. We desperately need new assistance from somewhere, and I understand that is coming. Maybe my last 30 seconds, I'll just mention construction of new housing. It's no secret that the supply chain has been a real problem in the last year. We've spent almost daily conversations with vendors that the plants are shut down. Nobody knows when it's going to open. We can't see what's going on. An example today, because this is carrying through to 2021, we're trying to build our last building here on the Botno Ridge campus right down Hemlock. And it should be a 10-month construction project. No contractor will sign on to less than the 13 months. It's just, that's the industry today. Time is money, and that just is one more thing that hurts. It doesn't help us create affordable units. So if that kind of wraps up our experience with building and operating projects, we expect things to open up this summer, but the supply chain issues to continue on through the fall.
Thanks, John. And we're going to have John Slade just put up a picture of the Botno development, just so folks can see. And of course, Duffy Development is developing housing throughout the metro area. This is the Botno development in Maple Grove. So thank you for all your great work, John.
Okay,
Roxanne, we'll turn it back to you to take us through the questions and answers or discussion with the local policymakers.
Thank you. So thanks, John, Lydia, and Nalima. Really appreciate your sharing. And now if John could put the slide up with the local questions, and Judy Johnson, I believe, wants to speak first.
As John's putting that up, we're going to try to limit this portion again to about 5 to 7 minutes. So if you're interested in participating as a local policymaker, if you want to raise your hand, we'll get you on right after Judy. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you for inviting me to be here today. I am now reading how will you support equitable solutions and sharing our, is that still our question for all of us as well?
Yeah, if you would.
Okay, well, first of all, just a little bit about me briefly. Before coming to the Met Council under the Walls administration, I was mayor and city council member for the city of Plymouth for over 20 years. And this is very personal to me because as a single mother in my 20s, I experienced a lot of insecurities in my life. And I think that's why I have such passion for this work. Let me just tell you a bit about what Met Council does and how it relates to all of this. You probably all know, but the council's role in housing is really providing rental assistance to low-income households, serving those experiencing homelessness and sheltering on our transit, defining local government shares of the regional need for low and moderate income housing, reviewing local comprehensive plans to ensure that communities are planning an adequate supply of land for affordability, funding housing development through the Livable Communities Act program, providing incentives for housing performance, and also we're just a wealth of providing technical assistance, data, and support to local government. So please keep that in mind. Met Council has a bunch of research and data, and we can make that all available to you. I want to let you know that the Met Council has been participating in providing the Livable Communities program since I think it was 1996 when it was first adopted by the legislature. The Livable Communities program is a voluntary incentive-based approach for communities created by the state statute, 1995, sorry about that. We work to create and preserve living wage jobs, create incentives for full range of housing opportunities, create opportunities for affordable housing, and create incentives for compact and efficient development. And I want to let you know that just this week, we authorized $25 million to be made available through our local Livable Communities program, and really hope that cities, if they haven't signed back up and renewed their role in livable communities, that they'll do that this year. And we really want to work with local developers as well. This year too, we went through the scoring program, which gets to some of these things to ensure that we have equitable opportunities. We wanted to align the program more closely with the legislative act that enables this and get more tightly aligned with that. But we also have a component of equity now that we've advanced and increased scoring in that. And there's a lot of detail, we can provide that later, but what we're trying to do is make sure that everything has an equity lens that comes through our work.
Judy,
So
I'm sorry,
with that,
Judy, I'm sorry, we have to move on. Thank you.
Sure.
And I believe that Council Member Susan and Council Member Lisa would like to speak.
Thank you.
Susan, are you still on? Susan Fa?
I'm here. I'm sorry, but my camera's not working right now, so I apologize. Can you guys all hear me?
Go ahead.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to spend this morning with all of you, and I just want to echo the commitment to ensuring affordable housing for all. I just want to add one thing to the conversation, and that is that I've seen over the years just tens of thousands of people and families who share housing because they have to, because they have no choice and otherwise would be homeless. And I think that sometimes when we look at homelessness or housing, we don't often think about these people and families who are living in homes together in the equation. And so homelessness counts seems to be much lower than it really is in our communities. And I want us to recognize that when we think about policy or legislation or the work that we do, to acknowledge that there are people that are living, whether it's in generations living together or families living together. And how do we make it easier for people to do that instead of harder for people to do that? Because otherwise they would be in a situation where they are homeless. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation and say as well that I echo all the commitments to ensuring housing for all. Thank you.
Thank you. And Lisa Jacobson, go ahead.
Thanks. And I just want to say that while some of the work that we have accomplished in the last few years, working closely with partners like ACER around like our MICAH policy, a long way to go. And I know Lima would say too. But just projects come forward and it's all on bedrooms again. And we say, we already have that. We need twos. We need, and we're getting that now in the projects starting to move forward. I want to say that my day job, I've worked in homeless youth programs, I've worked in food shelves, and right now I work in the state's one of only 2 psychiatric residential treatment facilities for children. And when we talk about, you know, when Senator Hoffman or Kelsey, you know, everything was just resonating with what I see in that place where these are most severe, experiencing the most severe mental illness. And we'll look up the street to places like Link and Hopeless, where I was the leader there for a while. You know, if we don't get back here, we're going to see those same kids in that next program and then the next thing and the next thing. And so when you talk about root cause, we have to start to dig in more and quit putting the Band-Aids on and really dig in deep and fix a lot of the brokenness in a lot of the different structures and programs, and work with our legislators to see that we have the funding to do so. Senator Hoffman has taken time out of his busy schedule to come out to the PRTF where I am and see it with his own eyes, and I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'd like to thank everybody for their comments, and we're going to move on to the next slide then, John. And we're going to ask you to take a screenshot of this, just in case you don't have time to do it right now. We would like you to call the majority leader, Senator Gazelka, and the Speaker of the House here in Minnesota, Representative Hortman, to ask them to please support the Homes for All agenda and at least $100 million for housing infrastructure bonds, which will focus at 30% of median income and below without supportive services, and with supportive services too, because that's already an eligible use. And then to please support funding for equal education opportunities for students with special needs, no matter where they live. And so you may feel a little bit uncomfortable in making a call, but I encourage you to think about two things. One is think about how much money you pay in taxes right now, and think about that total amount. And where else in your budget do you just hand that money over to somebody and you don't say how you want it to be spent? So as people who are taxpayers, we want you to use your voice and use your power to say how you'd like to see those dollars used. And this is a way that you can do that. And just to follow up on couple of the other comments is that MICAH and the National Coalition for the Homeless have been promoting using the Department of Education's definition of homelessness, which includes folks that are doubled up, because we do think that by only counting those folks that actually are on the streets or unsheltered or in shelters gives us a very low count. So we may not have time for you to pull out your phone to do this right now, but encourage you again to take a screenshot. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Erin to provide some actions that you can take, and then to close us out for today.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Aaron Burke. I'm a housing organizer with Jewish Community Action, mostly working across Hennepin County. A couple action steps that you can take moving forward. Beacon's Day for Home Action Day is March 1st. Hunger Day on the Hill is also March 1st. Homeless Day on the Hill is March 9th through 11th. And Mental Health Day on the Hill, also March 11th. And the Joint Religious Legislative Council, also March 11th. So all the links to sign up for those events are right there. And we would love to see you at all of those events. Just to close us out briefly, for the Jewish community, today is actually a celebratory day. It's the holiday of Purim. Purim takes place on the 14th of the Jewish month of Adar. And it's said during the entire month of Adar that our joy is to increase. It's said that in the Talmud. So this month is a fairly joyous month. And there's a bit of a contradiction there, because the holiday of Purim, just to recount the story really quickly, is a story that takes place in exile in Persia. And the king Ahasuerus was looking for a new wife at a pageant, and he found a young woman named Esther, who was a young Jewish woman, but she kept her Jewish identity secret. And at the same time, the king promoted a new prime minister whose name is Haman, who was violently anti-Semitic and really did not like the Jewish community. The leader of the Jewish community, Mordecai, refused to bow to Haman in the street, as was commanded by Haman himself. And through a long series of events that I won't go through, Haman tried to commit genocide against the Jews of Persia. The Jews were only saved by the bravery of Esther and Mordecai working together to convince the king otherwise. And so on the surface, the story of Purim is a story of genocide, or narrowly averted genocide. but we are told to increase joy during the month. And it seems a little bit disconnected to me. So why do we practice joy? Well, the former chief rabbi of Britain, Lord Jonathan Sacks, whose memory is a blessing, recently passed away, points out that the only way we actually defeat fear, fear of the other, fear in any sort of sense, is to practice joy. Terror can only be conquered by collective celebration. So on the holiday of Purim, there is a ton of dancing. There is a reenactment of the story that is in a play form. That is everyone dresses in costumes. It's a really fun holiday. And so the message that I want to leave us with in our last couple minutes today is that when we're thinking about how we allocate resources, especially around housing, we also need to practice joy. Joy when we create our budgets and set our allocations. Fear-based decision-making says there isn't enough for everyone to go around, but joy-based decisions know that our state is abundant. There's so many resources to offer in Minnesota, and we can choose to make sure that every Minnesotan has a stable and affordable home. So wanted to wish everyone a happy Purim, wish you joy on this Friday and going into this weekend, and thank you all for coming.
And thank you, Aaron. And John, if you want to go to the last slide, we just want to recognize all the different groups that were a part of this event. And Roxanne, do you want to say a word or do you want me to close out?
I can close this out. I just want to thank everyone for coming. As you see, I have grandchildren here, and thankfully they were quiet. That was a prayer answered. So I am just so grateful that you all were part of this today, and I'm still confident that we can do this work, as Aaron said, joyfully. There is an abundance of resources, and we're going to get them directed to the right place to make sure that each and every one of God's children have a place to call home tonight. And we're going to keep working for this. So thank you all for coming. It was great to see your faces on Zoom, and I look forward to partnering with you as we move forward. Take care and have a wonderful day. Bye now.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelsey.
Thank you, everyone.
If the Housing for All team wants to stay on
Thank
for a
you.
minute or two, we'll just visit for a quick second. Thank you all again. Appreciate you all being with us.
Have a good day. And I'm gonna let you know, I've already left a message for Hortman and for Gazilka.
All right, way to go, Tyra. Take it
make
on.
it happen, y'all. Make it happen.
Yep.
For the days
Tyra.
out. I implore you.
Thank you.